In this video, I'm going to offer you the top tips to raise your credit score over the next month. If you haven't already, I highly suggest you go watch my Credit Score 101 video. I go over the basics of a credit score. I do think it's important for you to first understand your credit score and everything that goes into coming up with that score. There are also some tips in that video that could be helpful for you, so watch that and then come back here. But we're gonna get right into the tips. So my first tip is actually for somebody who has no credit score or not much credit built. So you need to get some credit first. The easiest way to do that is probably getting a credit card or a secured card, and this way you can have a credit card for you to make charges to, and you can pay those charges off, and each time you do that you will be increasing your credit score. You could also get a loan, you could get co-signed onto something. I offer more tips in that Credit Score 101 video on how to actually get credit, but that's the first obvious tip, is like you need to have more credit available so that your score can actually increase. I know a lot of people are afraid of credit cards, but if your score does not exist or if it's very low, you may need to apply for one in order to get that back up. Of course, if you have student loans or auto loans, anything like that, you just want to keep making your payments, making them on time and in full. The second tip is to stay on top of your payments and keep your credit card debt down. So never miss a payment. If you already are missing payments, then we've got to get on top of that first. You know, you've got to work an extra job if you need to cut out somewhere in your budget, you need to be saving more money so that you can put enough to whatever you need to pay so that you don't make any late payments. Set up auto payments, anything that you need to do to never miss a payment again or never miss a payment ever. If you miss a payment and it goes past 30 days, that will go to your credit and it will lower it dramatically, like by dozens. And if you go even further into past 60 days or past 90 days, that could put you at risk for going into collections or getting your car repossessed or anything repossessed, and also dramatically lowering your credit scores. The longer you go without making that payment, then the worse your credit score will be. And it's hard to get that off of your account. It's gonna be on there for years, so do not make late payments. Avoid that at all costs. If you do have credit card debt, focus on paying that off first, because that is also going to help you increase your score. Because if you go back and watch that Credit Score 101 video, I was talking about the utilization rate, and this has a high impact on your credit score. So if you have a utilization rate of 80%, your score is not going to be good. You want it to be less than 30% to really get your score up there, but ideally at 0. And if you want to get your credit score up quickly, be aware of your statement date. So if you have a credit card and let's say the due date is the 15th of every month, make that payment, make any extra payments that you can if you are able to before that due date or on that due date. So do it before the statement date. So the statement date typically comes, 3 or 4 days after the due date. So maybe the 18th of the month. And then after that is when it gets reported to your credit. So if you make the payment right after that statement date, it's gonna take a whole nother month for it to be reported to the credit bureaus. So make that payment before the statement date, and then you will see the increase faster. Tip number 3 is for if you have a late payment. So I suggest calling the lender and trying to negotiate this. If this is your first time with a late payment, then you could potentially get out of this and get it off of your credit score. If something is going on, the first thing that you can do is obviously be nice and explain your situation. Explain to them that you are trying to communicate with them, that you are trying to, work on your finances, and you promise that you'll go ahead and set up auto payments if they could remove this from your credit report. This may not work, but it's definitely worth a shot. So, you don't want to make the habit of making those payments. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to move those from your credit report, but it is worth a shot to call them. Otherwise, you will just have to take responsibility for that. You missed the payment, it's going to be on your score for several years now, but you can continue to increase your score by preventing that from ever happening again. And then of course, if there is a mistake on your account, then you can dispute that. So you would either call the credit bureaus. Typically you have to write a letter and then mail that to them, and you can find, you know, their addresses online, and you would mail a dispute, and then they could remove it from your credit score if there was an actual mistake. Now, if you have something in collections, I suggest that you don't just pay that off. From the research that I've done, I personally have never had this happen. Typically, if you pay a collection, it doesn't help your credit score. So what you would need to do, of course, you do want to pay something if you owe it, but what you typically want to do is call the lender and negotiate for a pay for delete, and you need it in writing. So basically, let's say you owe $1,000 on something that's in collections. This could be a medical bill or credit card or anything. So if you owe $1,000, either you need to save up that $1,000 before calling them, or save up a big chunk of that, like maybe $800, and say, can I pay you this for you to delete it from my credit score? Obviously, this may not always work, and you should be really respectful when you're making this call, because keep in mind, this is your responsibility, not the person on the phone. So do this as respectfully as possible and try your best to get this, to negotiate this. You can probably do more research on what to say and exactly what to look out for. But if you do this pay for delete, make sure you get it in writing. And you know, you may even want to get it notarized or anything like that. Make sure you have that in writing. Otherwise, this could be a complete flop. My next tip is to either go onto your apps or call your lenders to see if they can increase your credit limit. This is one of the easiest ways to increase your credit score if you do have any credit card debt, because it will automatically lower your utilization rate. So for example, let's say you have a credit limit right now of $2,000, and right now you have that maxed out. So you're using $2,000 of that credit limit. So your utilization rate is at 100%. So your credit score is probably pretty low. However, if you call and ask for an increase, and let's say your increase goes to $4,000, and you still just keep that utilization at $2,000, you are now at a utilization rate of 50%. So a 50% decrease for your overall utilization rate will significantly increase your credit score. Obviously, to qualify for something like this, you have to show that you are responsible. You have to show that you make your payments on time. You have to show that you actually use the credit card, things like that. But typically all you have to do is just go onto the app or onto the website and request the credit limit, and you'll find out right away or within a day or two if you qualify for something. Sometimes you'll get as much as you ask for, sometimes a little bit less, but it will help out. And the key here is do not use that difference. Do not use the increase, okay? So if you increase the credit limit, the idea here is to lower your utilization rate. So if you do end up using that credit limit, then it's going to go right back up. So avoid using it. This is just pretend it didn't even increase. It just is helping your score. Another thing you can do is to call your lenders and ask if they have an offer for a lower interest rate. From my experience, when I had credit card debt on multiple cards and I called the lenders, they all lowered my interest rate from like 24% down to like 16. So this is a pretty dramatic difference, and it can save you money by, you know, paying less in interest, and then you could actually be paying more toward the principal, and you can get this paid off sooner, lower that utilization rate, and increase your score. My next tip is for anybody who may have a credit card that has no balance on it, or if you recently paid off a credit card, make sure you keep that card in good standing. So don't just let it sit there. Every couple of months, you probably want to use it. You know, just go to a convenience store if you need something and just charge $5 on that credit card and then pay it off immediately. Otherwise, they may end up closing that account. Either they will tell you or they won't. And then what ends up happening is your credit history, your average credit history will decrease, which in turn will decrease your credit score. So you don't want to close out any accounts necessarily unless you absolutely have no control of how you spend your money. But if you reach a $0 balance, just keep that card open and then use it every so often so that you can keep it in good standing. My final tip is to see if you can have your rent and utility bills reported. So if you pay rent, there are certain services, typically you do have to pay for these, unfortunately, but there are certain services if you are desperate to increase your credit score that can go look back at your last year or two and start having that reported to your credit score, and also any other rent going forward. So if you have been making your rent payments on time and you need a boost in your credit score, you can have these services start reporting that to your credit score, and it should start increasing it. Same goes with utility bills. The one that I am most familiar with is Experian Boost. This is a free service offered by Experian, and they will look through your bank account and see if you have any utility bills or anything that qualifies for this. And they only look at the positive things. So if you've been making those payments on time, they can start reporting that to the credit bureaus as well. And that could potentially boost your score. I know for me, I did this and it was able to look at all of my electricity bills. However, my score didn't increase. But I would imagine somebody with a lower score who has been making their utility bills on time, that it could potentially increase by at least a little bit. And really quickly too. It was an immediate boost for people who did get an increase. But that's not the only option. There are other services to do that. And sometimes you could speak with your landlord if it's, if you have a landlord versus living in an apartment, or you could speak with certain companies to see if they could start reporting your payments to the credit bureaus. Now, keep in mind that your credit score is going to take some time to develop. If you are looking to, get an auto loan or get a mortgage or anything like that, just don't do anything significant right now. Especially if you're going to get a mortgage right now, for example, don't go and get a car loan. Don't take out a new credit card. Don't do anything new on your credit report unless it's going to benefit you. So this could be lowering your utilization rate, making sure you're making your payments on time, keeping your cards open that are already open, things like that. So of course, there's only so much that you can do within a month, and typically in order to increase your credit score significantly, you have either got to get back on track financially and just wait it out for things to be removed, and or pay off a lot of your debt. Obviously, these tips are pretty basic and simple, but there's not really an overnight fix. You can't just fix something that you have. If you have destroyed your credit for months and years, then you can't just fix that overnight. So obviously, just like when you're in school, how it's, you fail a test and then you're failing the class too, that's the same thing with the credit score. If you mess up once, you can really destroy your credit. So it's more important to focus on the long term. Like, what can you do for the long term to keep your score up and to improve it in the long run? Hopefully these tips were helpful though. Let me know if you try any of them out and if your score ended up increasing. Keep us updated. Otherwise, comment down below with any questions or video suggestions. Please give this video a thumbs up. It really supports my channel. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next video.